I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, clutching the phone invitation in my trembling hand. My daughter Julia's voice still echoed in my ears. "Mom, please don't come to the parent-teacher conference. Your accent, it's embarrassing. When you talk, everyone stares. It's humiliating." The words hit me like a physical blow. After 15 years in this country, after working 2 jobs to give my children everything I never had, after sacrificing my dreams so they could chase theirs, this was what I had become to them. An embarrassment. I looked around our modest kitchen, where I'd spent countless hours helping with homework, where I'd celebrated their achievements with homemade empanadas, where I'd wiped away their tears and bandaged their scraped knees. The same kitchen where I now felt like a stranger in my own home. "Mommy, estás bien?" My youngest, Alice, appeared beside me, her 10-year-old eyes filled with concern. At least she still called me Mommy without shame. "Sí, mi amor," I whispered, forcing a smile. "I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. Nothing had been fine for months. It started small, little comments here and there. Julia correcting my pronunciation at the grocery store. My son Miguel asking me to talk normal when his friends came over. The way they'd exchange glances when I spoke, as if my words were something to be endured rather than heard. I was born in a small town in Colombia, where my grandmother taught me that our language was music, that our stories were treasures passed down through generations. She'd sit me on her lap and tell me tales of brave women who crossed oceans, who built lives from nothing, who never forgot where they came from. "Your voice is your power, mija," she'd say. Never let anyone silence it. Yet here I was, 38 years old, voluntarily muting myself to spare my children the horror of having an immigrant mother who spoke with an accent. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I cleaned office buildings at night, I'd been working on something in secret, something that felt like betraying my own silence. In the quiet hours between shifts, in the early morning before the kids woke up, I'd been writing. Not in English, which still felt clumsy and uncertain on my tongue, but in Spanish, the language of my heart, my dreams, my deepest truths. I wrote about women like me, women who carried entire worlds in their hearts while being told they didn't belong. My phone buzzed. A text from Julia. "Mom, Maya's mom is driving us to school today. Thanks." No explanation. No apology for yesterday's harsh words. Just another small rejection that chipped away at whatever was left of my confidence. I walked to my bedroom and pulled out the worn notebook hidden beneath my mattress. Inside were hundreds of pages of handwritten stories, poems, and memories. My secret world, the one place where my voice still mattered. As I flipped through the pages, a loose sheet fell to the floor. It was a letter I'd written months ago but never sent, a submission to a small literary magazine. My hands shook as I read my own words, a story about a woman who slowly disappeared in her own home until she was nothing but a shadow, cleaning up after people who couldn't see her. The phone rang, startling me. An unknown number. "Hola? Is this Carmen Valdez?" The voice was crisp, professional, speaking English with what sounded like a slight accent I couldn't place. "Yes, this is she." I switched to English, automatically ashamed of my slip into Spanish. "Ms. Valdez, this is Isabella Rodriguez from Puente Publishing. I'm calling about your submission, The Invisible Woman. We'd like to discuss publication." The words didn't register at first. Publication? My story? The one I'd written in the middle of the night, tears streaming down my face as I poured out everything I couldn't say out loud? I'm sorry. There must be some mistake," I stammered. "No mistake, Ms. Valdez. Your story is exactly what we've been looking for. We'd like to feature it in our upcoming anthology about immigrant women's experiences. There's also interest from our parent company about expanding it into a full-length work." I sank onto the bed, the phone pressed to my ear as if it were a lifeline. "Ms. Valdez, are you there?" "Yes," I whispered. "I'm here." "Wonderful. Can we schedule a meeting? There's something else we'd like to discuss, a rather exciting opportunity." After I hung up, I sat in stunned silence. Through the thin walls, I could hear Julia and Miguel getting ready for school, their voices animated as they discussed their day. Neither had spoken directly to me that morning. I looked at the notebook in my lap, then at the family photo on my nightstand. all of us smiling at the camera, taken just 2 years ago when things were different, when my children still seemed proud of me. A car horn honked outside. Julia's ride to school. "Bye, Mom," Alice called out, the only one who bothered with a goodbye. I heard the front door close, leaving me alone with my secrets and my suddenly racing heart. The meeting with the publisher was scheduled for next week. Whatever they wanted to discuss, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, not knowing whether the next step would mean falling or flying. But as I sat there, clutching my notebook, I realized something had shifted. For the first time in months, I felt something stirring inside me that I'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. The question was, what would I do with it? And more importantly, would I have the courage to find out just how far my voice could carry, even if it meant risking everything I'd built with my family? The phone rang again. This time, I didn't hesitate to answer in the language of my heart. Hola? The elevator in the downtown office building felt like it was moving in slow motion. I clutched my worn purse tighter, the same one I'd carried for 5 years because buying a new one meant taking money away from Julia's piano lessons or Miguel's soccer equipment. Inside the purse was my notebook, my lifeline, my secret world. I'd never shown it to anyone before today. The receptionist at Puente Publishing had been kind, speaking to me in Spanish when she noticed my nervousness. "Señora Valdez, por favor, siéntese. Ms. Rodriguez will see you shortly." But nothing could have prepared me for Isabella Rodriguez herself. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with kind eyes and a confident smile that put me immediately at ease. "Carmen, thank you for coming. Your story moved me to tears," she said, settling into her chair across from me. "Tell me, how long have you been writing?" I don't know if I can call it writing," I said, my accent thick with nervousness. "I just write things down. At night, mostly. After work." "What kind of work do you do?" The familiar shame crept up my neck. "I clean offices, and during the day, I work at a factory packaging medical supplies." Isabella nodded, making notes. "2 jobs. Children?" 3. Julia is 15, Miguel 13, and Alice is 10. "And you write between working 2 jobs and raising 3 children?" She looked up from her notepad. "Carmen, do you realize how extraordinary that is?" I shifted uncomfortably. No one had ever called anything I did extraordinary. "Your story, The Invisible Woman, it's not just good, it's necessary. We've had dozens of responses since we posted the call for submissions, but yours speaks to something universal while being deeply personal." She leaned forward, her excitement palpable. "I want to discuss something bigger with you. Our parent company, Horizonte Books, is launching a new imprint focused on diverse voices, particularly immigrant women's stories. They're looking for fresh perspectives, authentic voices." My heart began to race. "We'd like to offer you a book deal, Carmen, a full memoir, expanded from your short story. But here's the thing. They want you to write it in Spanish first, then we'll have it professionally translated." "En español?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "Yes, in Spanish. Your authentic voice, your language. That's what makes it powerful." I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. I don't understand. My children, they tell me my English is not good enough, that my accent—" "Your accent is beautiful," Isabella interrupted firmly. "And your Spanish, it's poetry. The way you capture emotion, the way you weave cultural references with universal human experiences, that's not something that can be taught. That's gift." I felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "How much time would I have?" 6 months for the first draft. There's an advance, of course." She slid a paper across the desk. The number made me dizzy. It was more money than I made in 8 months of night cleaning. "There's something else," Isabella continued. "If this book does well, and I believe it will, there's talk of a speaking tour, book readings, literary festivals. Your story could reach thousands of women who need to hear it." "Speaking? In public?" The thought terrified me. "Carmen, you have something important to say. Don't let fear rob the world of your voice." As I walked home that afternoon, the contract tucked safely in my purse, I felt like I was floating. For the first time in years, I had a secret that filled me with joy rather than shame. But that feeling shattered the moment I walked through my front door. Julia was pacing the living room, her face red with anger. Miguel sat on the couch, arms crossed, glaring at me. "Mom, we need to talk," Julia said, her voice cold. "What's wrong, mi amor?" "Don't call me that," she snapped. "Mrs. Henderson called. She said Maya told her you might come to the parent-teacher conference after all." My stomach dropped. I'd forgotten about Maya's mother and the conversation we'd had at the grocery store days ago. "Julia, You can't come, Mom. Do you understand? You just can't." Her voice cracked, and I saw the teenager beneath the harsh words, scared, embarrassed, trying to fit in. "Why?" The question came out smaller than I intended. Miguel jumped in. "Because every time you talk to our teachers, they look at us differently, like we're charity cases or something." "Yeah," Julia added. "And your English?" "Mom, it's embarrassing. The other parents, they whisper. They assume we're poor, that we don't belong here." Each word was a knife to my heart. "We are poor," I said quietly. "But we don't have to act like it," Julia exploded. "Tyler's mom asked me if you even finished high school. Do you know how that felt?" I stood there, absorbing their words, feeling myself shrinking back into the shadow I'd been becoming. "I finished high school," I said softly. "In Columbia, I was studying literature at the university when I met your father." "That doesn't count here," Miguel said. "Here, you're just, you know." "What am I, Miguel? Tell me." He looked away, unable to say it, but Julia had no such hesitation. "You're the cleaning lady, Mom. That's what everyone sees. That's what we are to them. The cleaning lady's kids." The silence that followed was deafening. Alice appeared in the doorway, her backpack still on her shoulders, her face crumpled with the weight of what she'd just heard. "Mommy," she whispered, running to me. I held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the last piece of my heart that hadn't broken yet. "Julia, Miguel," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I understand you're embarrassed, but I am still your mother. I am still the woman who carried you, who sacrificed everything so you could have better lives." "We know that," Julia said, but her voice was softer now. We want to fit in, Mom. Is that so wrong?" I looked at my two older children, these American teenagers who spoke perfect English, who belonged in ways I never would. They were my greatest achievement and my deepest heartbreak, all at once. "No," I said finally. "It's not wrong to want to belong." Julia's shoulders relaxed slightly. "But it's also not wrong for me to exist," I continued, "to have a voice, to take up space in this world." That night, after the children were asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with the contract spread before me. Isabella's words echoed in my mind. "Don't let fear rob the world of your voice." I picked up my pen and signed my name, Carmen Elena Valdez, in the flowing script my grandmother had taught me. Tomorrow, I would begin writing my story, the real story, the one my children weren't ready to hear yet. But as I sealed the contract in an envelope, I wondered, what would happen when they discovered that their embarrassing mother, the cleaning lady with the thick accent, had something the world actually wanted to hear? The next 3 months passed in a blur of secret writing sessions and careful lies. I told the children I'd picked up extra cleaning shifts to explain my absences during our scheduled meetings with Isabella. The truth was, I was spending those hours in coffee shops across town, pouring my heart onto pages that would soon become my book. Writing in Spanish felt like coming home after years of exile. The words flowed like water, carrying stories I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten they existed. Stories about leaving everything behind, about the weight of other people's expectations, about slowly disappearing in your own life. Isabella had been right. This wasn't just my story. It was the story of thousands of women like me. "You're different lately," Alice observed one evening as I helped her with homework. At 10, she was still the only one who really saw me. "Different how, mi amor?" "Happier. Like you have a secret that makes you smile." If only she knew. The lie was getting harder to maintain, especially when Isabella called with updates that made my heart race with excitement. The initial response from early readers was overwhelmingly positive. They were already discussing translation rights for other countries, possible book club selections, even film adaptation interest. "Carmen, you need to start thinking about publicity," Isabella had said during our last meeting. "Book readings, interviews. The marketing team wants to build a campaign around your story, the immigrant woman who found her voice." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, being celebrated for my voice, while my own children wished I would stay silent. That Wednesday, everything changed. I was at the factory, mindlessly packaging medical supplies, when my phone buzzed with a text from Julia. "Mom, emergency at school. Come now." My heart stopped. I grabbed my purse and rushed out, ignoring my supervisor's protests about leaving early. The drive to the school felt endless. 1,000 scenarios ran through my mind. Accidents, fights, illness. By the time I reached the principal's office, I was shaking. "Mrs. Valdez? Thank you for coming so quickly," Principal Morrison said, his tone serious but not alarmed. "Please, sit down." Julia was already there, her face pale and streaked with tears. Miguel sat beside her, looking younger than his 13 years. "What happened?" I asked, reaching for Julia's hand. She didn't pull away. "There was an incident today," Principal Morrison began. "Some students were unkind to Julia and Miguel, making comments about their family background, their mother's job." My stomach clenched. This was my worst fear realized. "What kind of comments?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Julia finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "They said we were probably illegal, that our mom probably couldn't even read, that we didn't belong at this school." Miguel wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "I got in a fight with Jason Miller. He said you were probably too stupid to help us with homework." The familiar shame washed over me, but this time it was mixed with something else. Rage. Not at my children, but at a world that made them feel like they had to choose between loving me and belonging. "I see," I said quietly. "And what did you tell them?" Julia looked up at me, her eyes full of pain. "Nothing. We said nothing, Mom. Because what could we say? That you're smart? That you work harder than anyone we know? They wouldn't believe us. They only see the cleaning lady," I finished. She nodded, fresh tears spilling over. Principal Morrison cleared his throat. "Mrs. Valdez, I want you to know that this behavior is unacceptable. The students involved will face consequences. But I also think this might be an opportunity for a broader conversation about diversity and respect in our school community." I sat there, looking at my 2 older children, these beautiful, smart, accomplished kids who'd been taught to be ashamed of me. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. "Principal Morrison," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I'd like to help with that conversation." Julia's head snapped up. "Mom, no, please. What did you have in mind, Mrs. Valdez?" "I know you have cultural awareness assemblies. I'd like to speak at one. About immigration. About the stories behind the labels people put on us." "Mom," Miguel whispered urgently. "You can't. Please don't." But something had shifted inside me. Isabella's words echoed. "Don't let fear rob the world of your voice." "I think that's an excellent idea," Principal Morrison said. "We have one scheduled for next month. Would you be interested in being one of our speakers?" "Yes," I said, ignoring Julia's sharp intake of breath. "I would be honored." The drive home was silent except for Alice's chatter from the back seat. Julia and Miguel sat rigid, their anger and embarrassment radiating like heat. That night, after dinner, Julia cornered me in the kitchen. "Mom, you can't do this, please. It'll make everything worse." "Worse than your classmates thinking I'm too stupid to read?" She flinched. "That's not... I mean, Julia, do you know what I was studying in university before I came here?" She shook her head. "Literature. I was going to be a teacher, maybe a professor. I spoke 3 languages, Spanish, English, and French. I had dreams, plans, a whole future mapped out." Julia stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Then I met your father, and everything changed. I don't regret it. You 3 are the best thing that ever happened to me. But I never stopped being that person inside, the one who loves words, who has stories to tell. But Mom, your English..." "My English is fine, Julia. It's not perfect, and it carries the music of my homeland. but it's mine, and I'm tired of apologizing for it. Miguel appeared in the doorway, having clearly been listening. "What if they laugh at you?" he asked quietly. I walked over and cupped his face in my hands. Then they laugh. But maybe, just maybe, one child in that audience will hear my story and realize that having parents who speak with accents, who work hard jobs, who come from somewhere else, maybe they'll realize that's not something to be ashamed of. Over the next few weeks, I prepared for the assembly with the same dedication I'd put into my book. I practiced my speech, timed it perfectly, and worked with Isabella on presentation skills during our regular meetings. "You know," Isabella said one afternoon, "your book is generating quite a buzz in the publishing world. We've had inquiries from major bookstore chains, several book clubs, and 3 different literary festivals want you as a keynote speaker." I nearly choked on my coffee. Keynote speaker? Carmen, you're not just a writer. You're becoming a voice for an entire community. This book could change lives. That evening, I found Alice reading in her room. "Mommy, are you really going to speak at our school?" "Yes, mi amor. How do you feel about that?" She considered this seriously, as she did everything. "I think it's brave. Julia and Miguel are scared, but I think they're also a little proud. They just don't know how to say it yet." The night before the assembly, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the contract hidden in my drawer, about the book that would be published in just 2 months, about the secret life I'd built with words. Tomorrow, I would stand in front of my children's entire school and speak my truth. But I still had one more secret, the biggest one of all. What would happen when they discovered that their embarrassing mother wasn't just brave enough to speak at an assembly, but had written something that the world actually wanted to read? As I lay in bed, clutching my speech, I realized that tomorrow would be the beginning of everything, or the end of the fragile peace I'd built with my children. Either way, there was no turning back now. The morning of the assembly, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting my best dress, the navy blue one I'd bought for Julia's 8th grade graduation. My hands were shaking as I applied lipstick, the same shade I'd worn on my wedding day 15 years ago. "You look beautiful, Mommy," Alice said from the doorway, already dressed for school. "Thank you, mi amor. Are you nervous?" She considered this with her usual seriousness. "A little, but more excited. I want my friends to know how amazing you are." If only her siblings felt the same way. Julia had barely spoken to me for days, and Miguel kept shooting me pleading looks, as if I might change my mind at the last minute. This morning, they'd both left for school early without saying goodbye. At 10 o'clock, I walked into Jefferson Middle School's auditorium. The space was larger than I'd expected, filled with about 300 students from grades 6 through 8. I spotted my children in the 3rd row, Alice waving enthusiastically, Miguel looking mortified, and Julia staring at her hands. Principal Morrison introduced the other speakers first, a local entrepreneur who'd immigrated from Vietnam, a doctor from Nigeria, and then me. Our final speaker today is Mrs. Carmen Valdez, parent of 3 of our students. Mrs. Valdez will be sharing her story about the immigrant experience and the importance of understanding the stories behind the people we meet every day. I walked to the podium on unsteady legs, my speech cards trembling in my hands. The auditorium fell silent, and for a moment, I was transported back to my childhood classroom in Columbia, where I'd given my first presentation about the books I loved. "Good morning," I began, my accent clear and unashamed. "My name is Carmen Elena Valdez, and I want to tell you a story." I saw some students glance at each other, at my pronunciation, my rhythm, the way my words carried the melody of my homeland. But I continued. 15 years ago, I came to this country with a suitcase, a dictionary, and a heart full of dreams. I left behind my family, my friends, my language, and my identity to build a better life for the children I hope to have someday. The auditorium was completely quiet now. Even the teachers had stopped their quiet conversations. When I arrived, I discovered that my university education didn't matter here. My 3 languages became a limitation instead of an asset. My dreams of being a teacher were replaced by the reality of survival, cleaning offices at night, working in factories during the day. I found Julia's eyes in the crowd. She was looking at me now, really looking, maybe for the first time in years. But the hardest part wasn't the work or the struggle. The hardest part was watching my children grow up ashamed of where they came from. Ashamed of me. A murmur rippled through the audience. Several students turned to look at Julia and Miguel, who had both gone very pale. You see, my accent became their embarrassment. My job became their secret. My love became their burden. And slowly, I began to disappear. Not just from their lives, but from my own. I set down my cards and spoke from my heart. But here's what I want you to understand. Behind every person with an accent is a story of courage. Behind every immigrant parent working multiple jobs is someone who gave up everything they knew for their children's future. Behind every broken English sentence is a human being with dreams, talents, and wisdom that might surprise you. The silence was profound now. I could see teachers wiping their eyes. My children are brilliant, kind, and accomplished. They speak perfect English. They understand American culture in ways I never will, and they have opportunities I could only dream of. But they are also part of a story that includes sacrifice, resilience, and the kind of love that crosses oceans. I looked directly at Miguel, who was staring at me with wide eyes. To the students who think it's funny to make jokes about someone's mother not being able to read, let me tell you something. I've read more books than most adults you know. I just read them in a different language. To those who assume that having an accent means being stupid, I solved problems, made decisions, and built a life in a language that wasn't my own. That takes intelligence, not stupidity. My voice grew stronger with each word. And to my own children, who have spent years wishing I was different, I am different. I am the woman who held you when you cried in Spanish before you knew any English. I am the person who worked 16-hour days so you could have piano lessons and soccer equipment. I am the mother who never let you see how much it hurt when you asked me to be quiet, to be invisible, to be less than who I am. Julia was crying now, not bothering to hide it. Miguel had his head in his hands. But I also want you to know that I understand. It's hard to be different in a world that rewards sameness. It's scary to stand out when all you want is to fit in. I don't blame you for wanting to belong. I wanted the same thing. I paused, looking around the auditorium at all these young faces. But belonging doesn't mean erasing where you come from. It doesn't mean silencing the people who love you. Real belonging means finding a place where all of who you are is welcome. Your history, your family, your story. I was nearing the end of my speech when I spotted a familiar face in the back of the auditorium. Isabella Rodriguez sat in the last row, smiling and giving me a small thumbs up. What was she doing here? In closing, I said, my confidence surging, I want to leave you with this thought. The next time you meet someone who speaks differently than you, who comes from somewhere else, who doesn't fit your expectations, remember that they are not just what you see on the surface. They are libraries of stories, museums of experiences, and bridges between worlds. And maybe, just maybe, they have something to teach you that will change your life. The applause started slowly, then built to something thunderous. Students were standing, teachers were clapping, and I felt like I was floating. But my eyes were on my children. Alice was beaming, clapping wildly. Miguel was applauding too, tears streaming down his face. And Julia was looking at me like she was seeing me for the very first time. Her expression a mixture of pride, guilt, and something that looked like awe. As I left the podium, Principal Morrison shook my hand warmly. Mrs. Valdez, that was extraordinary. Thank you. But before I could respond, Isabella appeared at my side. Carmen, that was incredible, she said, then lowered her voice. But I have news that can't wait. The book, it's being fast-tracked for publication. And there's been a development you need to know about. My heart raced. What kind of development? It's been selected for the National Book Award long list. Carmen, do you understand what this means? Your story, your voice, it's going to reach millions of people. I felt the world tilt around me. The National Book Award, my secret writing, born from nights of loneliness and shame, was being recognized at the highest level. When? I whispered. The announcement goes public tomorrow. Which means, Carmen Valdez? A voice interrupted us. I turned to see a woman with a press badge approaching. "I'm Jennifer Walsh from the Tribune. I'd love to do a feature story about your speech today and your upcoming book release." The blood drained from my face. A reporter? Here? Now? Behind the reporter, I could see my children making their way toward me through the crowd, their faces still emotional from the speech. They had no idea that in the next few minutes, their entire world was about to change again. The secret I'd been keeping, the book, the recognition, the fact that their embarrassing mother was about to become a celebrated author, was about to explode into the open whether I was ready or not. "Mom!" Alice reached me first, throwing her arms around my waist. "You were amazing! Everyone was crying." Julia and Miguel followed, their faces still flushed with emotion. I could see questions in their eyes, confusion about the reporter, about Isabella's presence, about the conversation they'd partially overheard. "Mrs. Valdez," the reporter pressed, "could we talk about your book? The Invisible Woman is generating quite a buzz in literary circles." Julia's head snapped up. "Book? What book?" My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't how I'd planned it. I'd imagined telling them gently, privately, when the time was right. I can explain," I began. "Carmen," Isabella said softly, "maybe we should—" "No." I looked at my children's faces, Alice's curiosity, Miguel's confusion, Julia's growing suspicion. They deserved to know. I took a deep breath. 3 months ago, I submitted a story to a publisher. It was accepted. Then they offered me a book deal. "A book deal?" Miguel's voice cracked. "You wrote a book?" "I've been writing for years. At night, after work, early in the morning before you woke up. In Spanish, about our experiences, about what it means to be an immigrant woman in this country." Julia stared at me. "The extra cleaning shifts? Meetings with my editor? Writing sessions?" I couldn't read her expression. "I wanted to tell you. But after everything that happened, after you said, I wasn't sure how you'd react." "Mrs. Valdez," the reporter interjected, "the National Book Award long list announcement—" "Wait," Julia interrupted, her voice sharp. "Did she say National Book Award?" I closed my eyes. Yes. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the lingering crowd of parents and students seemed to fade away. "Your book," Miguel said slowly, "is nominated for the National Book Award. It's on the long list," I clarified. "It's a preliminary selection. It might not—" "Mom," Julia's voice was barely a whisper. "The National Book Award that's huge. That's like the biggest literary prize in America." Alice looked between her siblings and me. "Is this good?" "It sounds good." Isabella stepped forward gently. "It's very good, sweetheart. Your mother has written something extraordinary, something that's going to help a lot of people. But why didn't you tell us?" Miguel's voice was hurt, confused. I looked at my son, this boy who'd told me just weeks ago that I was just the cleaning lady. How could I explain that I'd hidden my success because I was afraid they'd be embarrassed by it too? "Because," I said carefully, "I wasn't sure you'd be proud of me. I thought you might see it as another way I was different. Another way I didn't fit in." Julia's face crumpled. "Oh, Mom. Oh, God, what have we done?" "Nothing that can't be fixed," I said, reaching for her hand. "Mrs. Valdez," the reporter tried again. "If I could just ask a few questions about—" "Actually," a new voice interrupted, "I think we should talk first." We all turned to see Principal Morrison approaching with someone I didn't recognize. A tall woman in an elegant suit. "Mrs. Valdez," Principal Morrison said, "this is Dr. Lydia Smith from the district office. She heard your speech and, well, she has something she'd like to discuss with you." Dr. Smith smiled warmly. "Mrs. Valdez, I'm the district's coordinator for multicultural education. That speech was exactly what we've been looking for. We'd like to offer you a position." "A position?" I repeated numbly. "We're launching a new program to support immigrant families in our schools. We need someone who understands the challenges, who can bridge the gap between families and the education system, someone who can help other parents find their voice." Julia grabbed my arm. "Mom, she's offering you a job. A real job." "I have a job," I said automatically. 2 jobs. A career, Dr. Smith corrected. Using your education, your experience, your gifts. We can offer you a salary that would allow you to leave the cleaning service, work normal hours, and still support your family. I felt dizzy. In the span of one morning, I'd gone from being the embarrassing mother with the thick accent to a potential award-winning author being offered a professional position. I need to think about this, I said. Of course, Dr. Smith handed me her card. But Carmen, may I call you Carmen? What you did today, what you've done with your writing, it's exactly what our community needs. You've found your voice. Now help others find theirs. The reporter was still hovering nearby, but Isabella stepped between us protectively. Carmen has had quite a morning. Perhaps we could schedule an interview for later? As the crowd began to disperse, I found myself alone with my children for the first time since the speech. Mom, Julia said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We all are, Miguel added. We were horrible to you. You weren't horrible, I said, pulling them close. You were scared. You were trying to fit in. I understand that. But we made you feel like you had to hide, Julia continued. We made you think we weren't proud of you. And the whole time you were writing this book, doing something incredible, and we— Stop, I said firmly. We all made mistakes. But look at us now. Look at where we are. Alice, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. Mommy, can I read your book? I laughed, the sound surprising even me. It's written for adults, mi amor. But when you're older, yes. I hope you'll read it and understand why I had to write it. Will you read it to us? Miguel asked. I mean, parts of it? I want to know your story, the real story. Julia nodded eagerly. Me too. And Mom? I want to learn Spanish. Real Spanish, not just the little bit we remember from when we were small. I want to read your book the way you wrote it. That evening, we sat around our kitchen table, the same table where I'd signed the book contract in secret, where I'd helped with homework while fighting back tears, where I'd felt most invisible. But tonight, I felt seen. So what happens now? Julia asked as we shared takeout pizza, a celebration dinner that felt more significant than any fancy restaurant meal ever could. Now, I said, we figure it out together. The book comes out in 6 weeks. There will be interviews, book readings, maybe even a tour. The school job offer is real, and I think I want to take it. What about the cleaning service? Miguel asked. I'll give notice. It's time to stop hiding what I'm capable of. Alice bounced in her chair. Can we come to your book readings? If you want to, I said. But I need you to know. This book is about our struggles, about what it was like to feel invisible in my own home. It might be hard to hear. Julia reached across the table and took my hand. We want to hear it, Mom. All of it. We want to know who you really are. That night, as I tucked Alice into bed, she looked up at me with those wise 10-year-old eyes. Mommy, were you always this amazing? Or did you just become amazing today? I smoothed her hair back from her forehead. I think I was always me, mi amor. I just forgot for a while. But you know what helped me remember? What? Knowing that I had 3 incredible children who needed to see that being different isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to celebrate. 6 months later, I stood at another podium, this time at the National Book Awards ceremony in New York City. The Invisible Woman hadn't won. That honor went to a brilliant novelist whose work I genuinely admired. But being there, being recognized, being seen, was victory enough. In the audience, I could see my children's faces glowing with pride. Julia had indeed learned Spanish and was now helping me translate my next book. Miguel had started a multicultural club at school, and Alice had written her own story about a little girl whose mother was brave enough to use her voice. As I looked out at the crowd of writers, publishers, and readers, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the scared woman who'd almost disappeared in her own home to this moment of recognition and triumph. But the real victory wasn't the award nomination or the book sales or even the beautiful review in the New York Times. The real victory was sitting in the 3rd row, clapping and cheering for their mother. The woman with the accent, the immigrant, the cleaning lady who had always been a writer. I had found my voice. And finally, so had they. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from.